Hey everybody, happy Monday. This is actually a follow-up more from the Jason Momoa video last week about the comments about, the number of Game of Thrones actors who clearly had less than ideal experiences on Game of Thrones, talking about feeling objectified and uncomfortable and nope, we'll never go. It was a great experience. Thanks for the opportunity, but nope. And someone passed on this organization, and I really want to call it to people's attention because I think it's really quite cool. It's called Intimacy Directors International, and it's intimacy choreography for theater, intimacy coordination for TV and film. Basically, it's the people. It's an organization that wants to treat nudes, anything involving sexuality, in a similar way that they do fight choreography and active stunts, as something that is sort of safe and consensual and everybody understands, and things are agreed to in advance, and everybody's on the same page. And it's really interesting if you sort of dive through the site. The different things they consider. One is they talk about how contract negotiations have changed and become much more specific, that instead of just agreeing to do nudity, or agreed to do scenes of sexuality, it's, you are agreeing to simulate oral sex and this, that, and the next thing. And that I know that's a thing. The thing I was most concerned about, I was interested in seeing how they handled this, was what happens when you're on set and the director's like, we need more. Directors get very energetic, I'll say, and they sometimes don't think. They're so interested in getting the perfect shot that they don't think about the fact that, whoa, all of a sudden this is, uncharted territory. And what these on-set intimacy coordinators are there to do is take note of the fact that the actor is kind of like, okay, they sure don't seem enthusiastic about the idea of this. And when you do these things, having been there, you don't want to be the person that grinds to a halt a very expensive production with like 50 people on a set, because you're having issues with something. One, because you feel bad, you recognize everybody's working really hard, you want to be a team player, but you also don't want to get labeled a diva. And so what these intimacy coordinators are there to do is they're the one who are like, no, we're not doing this. This was not part of the contract. We didn't agree to this. People aren't, totally on board. This isn't happening. And here are some alternatives. Like, you want a bit more skin? Well, the example they gave is maybe we can put on a strapless bra. So you get that little bit more skin, but the actress still isn't exposed. It's there to supervise, the prevention of what James Franco is accused of, removing the barriers, the intimacy barriers that people wear on set. They're there to kind of smooth over things where I didn't know there was a difference between a barrier and a modesty cover. A barrier's actually there to prevent secretions it's often a hard object. So like for a woman, if a man gets aroused during the scene, which happens to men and women and everybody else alike sometimes, body responds to stimulus, they're not as aware of it because it's a hard barrier, so they're not feeling it down there. I didn't even know those existed, so that's pretty cool. So it's interesting because they have a pillars of safety and intimacy PDF. Well, actually, it's a Word doc. It's one of these Word docs, but it's interesting what it's a bunch of C's. It's 5 C's. And they are context, communication, consent, choreography, and closure. And The closure one was the one I'm like, yeah, I wish I had that more often. Let me move this up so you can see the whole thing. It's framed a bit goofy. There we go. Okay. So context is obvious. Is this actually advancing the story? Does this make sense? Does this give us a character point? What are the needs of this scene? What does this scene have to convey within the story? It's amazing how much that matters. And I think a lot of actors get talked into, oh yeah, this is really essential for the story, but it's just more, we wanted a really hot scene and that was it. Communication, the second one, this tends to break down on sets for that very reason I talked about. The people don't want to get labeled a problem. Then consent, that thing that people freak out about, but it's actually pretty important. I have always found it really strange, the sets that just throw people in, like, okay, you've just met, now do a very intimate activity. The better run places I know let people, they insist, they like go out for lunch and get to know each other as people. It really brings down the weird factor. It's always very strange to me when a production doesn't do that. And this is the one that people don't really think of, but it's actually really important. Choreography. When you're doing these scenes, it's really uncomfortable for men and women alike, but men tend to be the physical aggressors in these scenes because of, stereotypes. And it's very, very useful for men and women. I mean, for them to both be on the same page. At this point, I'm going to put my hand here and then I'm going to move you here. So everybody knows what's going on. Everybody's on the same page. Nobody has this moment where it's like, whoa, caught by surprise. Because those reactions are really hard to hide. They're kind of impossible to hide, whoa, sort of thing. And that's probably not what they're going for in that scene. So not only is it making people more comfortable, it means you don't have to do a retake on something that was awkward to begin with. And then closure. And this one is something I think a lot of people miss, both in art and in real life. At the end of every rehearsal or scene of intimacy, actors are encouraged to develop a closing moment between them to signify the ending of the work. This small moment or simple ritual can be used between takes or runs of the scene and or upon close of the rehearsal. We encourage this as a moment to leave our characters' relationships and actions from the work behind and walk back into our lives. Likewise, we suggest all parties, including outside eyes, exercise proper self-care during and after the run or filming of intimate projects. Now, why did I say this is connection to the life? Well, I really believe that, remember that Aziz Ansari thing? I really believe that had he just actually had a conversation with the woman that had, that bad experience with him, if he'd actually talked to her and given her some closure and had a conversation, that never would have ended up in the press and he wouldn't have wrecked his career. The fact that he did things via text and didn't pick up the phone and didn't try to create closure there, it's very important when you experience any type of intimacy with someone, even on social media, and someone tells you something really personal in a DM. It's always really, really important, or somebody has like a low moment in front of you. It is so useful to follow up with them and go, hey, how are you, to normalize things, because they're probably embarrassed and they don't know what you think of them. And it helps so much for you to go, well, we're just back to normal. Is there anything you want to talk about? Or, anything like that. Just give them that indication that things are okay, that you're not judging them, that you don't think they're weird, that you're weird. Because, intimate things, I mean, that's personally, intimate things on camera become a much more complicated thing, because it's one of those things where if one person is being a jerk or seems uncomfortable, that becomes contagious. And professionalism is a thing for a reason. You try to keep it really light on sets that have intimate contact scenes. I mean, we used to do a show with topless women in a hot tub, and every so often we'd get somebody like a guest on set who was not fun. Believe it or not, a lot of comedians are actually pretty dreary people off stage, and they're control freaks, and they're really quite negative. And it just brought everybody down. And then we'd have to spend a lot of time shaking that off. It was very rare that the women in the hot tub on our show found anybody really unnerving. But it did happen a few times, and we did have to deal with it. And I mean, that's super important. I mean, if a person doesn't say something, there's very little we can do, but we made sure we had, female producers and things like that on set so that there was an increased feeling of comfort that they could say something and it would be taken seriously, and they weren't seen as a problem because of it. It was interesting. They said on the Intimacy Directors International website that makeup artists and wardrobe professionals are actually the happiest to have an intimacy coordinator on set, because they were the ones that had to unofficially be that person that was the sounding board for the talent. And I've been in situations where they were like, we need more nudity, and we need more nudity. It's like, whoa, this isn't, we need to add another apple. You're asking me to take my top off, jerk, and it's not well handled, and it's very abrupt. It's like, what do you mean need? If you needed this, you should have prepared and put it into the script more overtly. And obviously I'm no prude with that stuff, but I really get put off when people come at me like something like that is a demand, instead of it being, how would you feel about this, and being prepared to hear no. When I was a teenager and I was doing stuff, I worked with excellent directors who did feel like certain scenes should be more intimate, but I was like 15 years old. I think 15, 16 years old. And when I wasn't comfortable with something, they backed off, and there was no punishments against me for it. They were professionals, because it was very much in the moment, and it was just a suggestion, and it was sort of an open thing, and it was handled really cool. And I think that's part of the reason that I do feel more empowered than some women to say when I don't like something, because when I was, younger and, acting, that was respected. Other times when, I remember distinctly when I was doing a dance competition, and the competitions are held in, those massive US high schools. I've never seen a high school that big in Canada, but, these schools are like small towns. And so the dressing room is a classroom, and there's like 14, 15-year-old girls naked because we're changing, and dads of other competitors are in the room. And there was nothing we could do about it because we only had 3 or 4 numbers to change. But man, that was creepy. Somebody should have been there to tell those guys they had to leave, because we weren't such small children that anybody needed assistance dressing. But we were minors. We were, 14, 15, 16 years old. I stopped competing when I was 17. And people's, dads were in there. And it's like, it does make you hesitate. It does throw you off. And it just makes the whole aspect more nerve-wracking. In a competitive environment, anything can throw you off like that. In retrospect, in hindsight, I realize how unprofessional that was, and how those, it's so clear it was a very different time, because in this day and age, I don't think that still goes on, because someone would probably get sued. But, you know, one of the things they say on this website is the traumas that come up, the bad experiences that people talk about having in the past. Because, I mean, they do happen. And sometimes they're rookie mistakes or people not knowing how to do it better. But sometimes people do abuse their power. And they knowingly abuse their power because they can. It's Hollywood. It's get what you can for as long as you can. So I think part of the nice thing about this Intimacy Directors International is not only are they preventing bad experiences, they are actually showing people that there is another way. And by having a good experience, it helps people heal from their bad experiences, which is extremely important in Hollywood, especially an industry that hasn't budged much as far as women are concerned since they started measuring in the 1970s. That's why I don't get how why people get on video games. I mean, Hollywood hasn't had much improvement. Let's, credit and blame where credit and blame are due. And it got me thinking about, intimate scenes in video games, because I played Odyssey, so now I'm playing Origins to catch up. And there are some scenes where the main character, what's his name, Bayek, and his wife, Aya, are making out pretty hard. And as good as Ubisoft's motion capture is, it looks awkward. Because I guess they can't totally capture the fine movements with the lips, or I don't know what's going on with it, but it goes on for quite a while and it's kind of repetitive. And I mean, I remember when it was amazing when characters could touch. That was like, whoa, that was a huge technical achievement, but they still don't have the fine, detailed motion capture that's required to not have an uncanny valley element in intimate scenes in video games. And it makes me wonder what to do about it, because I mean, I'm too close to it. I know this is too inside baseball, but I just keep thinking, man, two people in those freaking motion capture suits had to do that. That must have been I think that is the most difficult acting in the world, trying to exude a certain amount of confidence in those suits that don't make anybody look good. They are really not flattering, especially to women's shapes. But for men, it's like guys usually aren't used to wearing something that skin tight, and it has to be. But it is awkward, and it is, different studios have different techniques of normalizing that and getting people over it. But I just keep thinking, man, people are wearing the tennis ball suits and having to straddle each other and things like that. That's gotta be weird. And that's why, a good mocap actor, it's a very different skill than just your regular acting. The requirements, you have to have such a great imagination, and you have to have such a firm grasp of character. It really is a skill. But yeah, I still don't think too much. Gaming is getting more and more and more about the sort of politics of intimacy and less about creating an emotional intimacy with the player. And that's what I enjoy more. I mean, I remember being in my early 20s and being so captivated by those romances, the really rudimentary romances in the Baldur's Gate games and Planescape Torment and things like that. And those are just portraits, right? There were no cutscenes. It was dialogue and it was portraits. But for some odd reason, I think because it was more emotional and it was more difficult, because it wasn't choose the heart icon to get romance. I found it so much more compelling. And, the romances for the most part in Dragon Age Origins were a lot more compelling than the fuck buddy stuff in Dragon Age Inquisition, with a few notable exceptions. I think that the Cullen storyline was better, even though he's racist, because there was that whole addiction angle, and you actually had to help him through choice. And you can do that as a friend as well as a romantic partner. And then the stuff with Solus that's like all over the internet, that he's got a secret. And Solus's racism actually made more sense to me because of who he is. But there's that real... There was you're sharing things in that. They tried to do it with Sarah. It didn't work for me. It worked for other people. But some of the other characters, I was really quite disappointed in the lack of actual romance and intimacy in their romance subplots. I thought even Dragon Age 2 did a better job. And, you know, one of the things I loved about those BioWare games before Inquisition and before the, you know, dialogue wheel Paragon Renegade thing of Mass Effect is I really, the first Mass... There was stuff. I mean, Garrus and Tally were kind of interesting. In 2, I really liked Thane's storyline, that sort of tragic element. But I always just felt like it was kind of cheating that you know the right thing to say because there's a little heart next to the option. It didn't feel as much like a game to me. There was no risk. Like, the fun of Origin is figuring out what people liked and didn't so they didn't get mad at you, and like, oh, I can't do that around Liliana, she'll get mad, but I can't do this around Morrigan, she'll get mad. And, you know, you were the leader and you were trying to keep everybody happy, and it wasn't necessarily completely intuitive. And I like that part of the game. I understand that, you know, for people with autism that might have been a bit confusing, but I find it so boring to just go blue one, red one, fist icon, heart icon, you know, like, this is not, I'm checking out. I'm not paying attention the same way. So we might need like intimacy coordinators for video games to make sure that our intimacy is actually intimate and romantic and not just statements about gender and sexual politics. Maybe we could use some of that, because I haven't experienced a game that really had actual romance in it in a while. And I kind of miss that, because like romantic big R, romantic tradition art has actually the most romantic game I think I've played in a really long time is the new God of War, because, and of course, you know, his wife is passed away, but it's Kratos finding out how much he didn't know about her and still maintaining his loyalty to her. I found that really touching. It was very deep. It was very mature. And that's probably the only game I played recently. There were a couple of sort of relationships in Odyssey that I thought, oh, this is cute. But the very nature of the Odyssey story is Cassandra or Alexios are sort of love 'em or leave 'em type characters. Just by nature of what they have to do. So while some of them were cute, I didn't pursue a lot of the sexual encounters in Odyssey just because it didn't make sense to me based on the character and based on the experiences I was having. And I like the fact that it gave people a choice, that if they wanted to be promiscuous and sleep with everyone, that was an option. In the Greek world, that was a valid option. So they made it fit the society. That's the right play. That's good. Like, I'm not criticizing. I think from a player choice perspective, it was really great. It just didn't feel intimate to me for the most part. And that's a different thing. So that's what made me think. Mainly, I just want to call your attention to Intimacy Directors International, but I also want to tie it into gaming because, man, we need help on adult storylines and all this. Women don't want sex. Women love sex. We love sexual storylines. That's why women write /fiction and read /fiction and do /art and look at /art. And women are fascinated and curious and perplexed by sex just like men. Not in the exact same way as men, but in equal amounts in different ways. Okay? Okay, thanks for watching. I think I forgot the Patreon. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK. If topics like this interest you, even $1 a month helps so much. Thanks for watching.